solution. MuleSoft started in 03 as an open source project. In 06, the company was formed, and customers were beginning to develop their integrations in an on-prem fashion using Mule. All Mule needed was a JVM, so it's very lightweight, especially compared to the heavyweight J2EE-based solutions from a lot of the legacy integration vendors. And so customers really liked it. Very lightweight solution that allowed me to integrate things very quickly. Soon after people started leveraging Mule, we needed a management console. So in comes the management center that delivered security as well as monitoring, management, and deployment capabilities for the platform. Then we decided we needed a way to share assets. Let's not build those and push them out and forget about them. Let's share those API specs, those SOAP services, the fragments, and the templates that we created with the broader organization and accelerate their ability to deliver solutions. And so Exchange was born. And Exchange really gives me a way to go out and define within my organization, like we said, those common templates. So I can see all of the things that are provided by Mule, as well as those items that were developed and published within our organization. So if I focus in on the Mule aspect of it, I can look at connectors. And we've got a couple hundred connectors out here that rank, for example, with a Salesforce connector, Twilio, Workday, SAP, ServiceNow. You can just scroll through these and see all of the technology and application connectors that we have out there. When you drill into one of these, you'll find additional documentation related to that particular asset and be able to go and find out if it is indeed what you're looking for. But there's connectors, there's templates. Let's say you're trying to implement something. Why start from scratch? If you're trying to do Salesforce to S4HANA Cloud Order Migration, here's a template for it. It already implements what you're trying to do. You don't have to think about that. Download it, import your credentials, and you'll be able to run that. So leverage the reuse capabilities that we have within the platform to build things. When we think about now, SaaS applications come into the picture, and companies wanted to start integrating those SaaS apps. Well, we certainly didn't want to integrate those SaaS apps and run that integration on-prem. We want to run that up in the cloud where those applications live. So we introduced Cloud Hub, which runs on AWS, and allowed us to host those integrations and run those on the cloud. No infrastructure required. Eventually, people said, I want to run in PCF. So we introduced the ability to run those Mule applications in PCF. Today, customers are running Mule in GCP, in Azure, in AWS, in their on-prem Kubernetes environments. Basically, Mule can run in any of those locations. In fact, you can take applications that are built to run on-prem and move those to Cloud Hub, and then move them to Azure, and then move them to AWS, and then GCP, and so on, without modification. Now, while all this stuff running all over the place, how do we manage that? Well, what we really want to do is have a common control plane that allows me to manage my applications that are running wherever they are. Whether it's batch applications that are doing ETL, APIs that I've deployed, SOAP services, microservices, whatever it might be, we want to be able to manage those through one management console. Now, there's a lot of different patterns. I've talked about a few of those, but let's highlight some of them. In Mule, with the same tool we use to create APIs, I can create migration patterns. I can implement a broadcast pattern with maybe pub-sub messaging. I can implement synchronization to help with Customer 360 initiatives. I can do aggregation patterns. I can implement correlation patterns that all within the same product. Today, a lot of companies, or a few years ago I should say, started wanting to implement API gateways. That too is something that can be implemented in the Mule platform. And today, when you look at the customers that are speaking at our events, they've taken it beyond just API gateways and into API-led connectivity. And how do we leverage experience, process, and system APIs to provide layers of abstraction and isolation that give organizations the ultimate flexibility, in effect delivering an application network that lets us plug in and unplug applications without impacting the connectivity between my consumers. Now, all of these different patterns are implemented with one product. We like to talk about the Mule platform, but it's really a misnomer. It's not a Mule platform. It's not made up of a lot of different components that you have to put together, like those integration suites of the past or the platforms today like AWS, Azure, and GCP that have all these components that you have to assemble. With Mule, the platform is a single product. You don't have to assemble anything. And what it covers is start to finish lifecycle. We start with an API-led architecture that allows us to define an API-based approach for handling integrations. We then go into API design. How can I take and very quickly design new API specs leveraging RAML fragments or OAS fragments that allow me to assemble APIs out of pre-built components. So whether you're doing RAML or OAS, we support them equally. And in fact, most of the organizations I work with have both. So it's important whatever tool you select for API design, be able to support both. And what you'll see coming out this year is support for async API, which brings support for event-based messaging. Now, once I've designed my API, or even as I'm designing my API, I can turn on my prototyping capability and very quickly expose an endpoint that allows my consumers to actually go out and validate the API that I'm creating is meeting their requirements. So by turning on a mock service and creating that prototype, I can now engage with my consumers to see, is this what you're looking for? Once we decide, yes, that's what I'm looking for, now I can go and start implementing that API. Now, we don't require you to write code to implement the API. Code is bad. Code is required in a lot of cases, but you should only use code when you need to. With today's integration tools like MuleSoft, you don't need to write code. You can leverage pre-built, pre-tested, pre-tuned components and free security screen components that make sure we can assemble things very quickly, more of a software factory approach. And so if I think about how we would build that today, it's by generating an API from an API spec, generating the scaffolding that gives me the method implementations that I have in here. And now when I start building out my methods, it's simply drag and drop from the list of pre-built components that I have over here. So if I want to integrate with Salesforce, I have my Salesforce connector. I drag over the specific component that I want to use into the mix and just configure it. I don't have to write any code. Or if I want to call a database, I just drag it over and drop it, and I don't have to write code. So we have a lot of different modules that we deliver as a part of this, and not all of them are installed in this particular environment. So if I needed to pull in the SAP connector, I would just come out here, specify I want to pull in the SAP connector, maybe for OData, add that in there, click on finish, it'll download it into my environment, and now I can use that to build out my solutions. So you're not writing code to actually implement any of these APIs. So as we generate the scaffolding, which accelerates the implementation, we also auto-generate a testing harness that you can use in your CI/CD delivery pipelines and automate that piece of it. Now, when we get to deployment, as we said, we can deploy anywhere. But the deployment can also be automated and integrated into your DevOps strategy so that we can do CI/CD processes and have that continuous environment that's delivering. When we want to secure the APIs, we don't have to go and secure each individual API. I can actually set up environment-level API policies that apply to everything within that environment. So you don't have to worry about, did somebody go in at the API level and apply policies? We can also apply policies to non-Mule code. Obviously, we can do that to Mule code that's built. We can do that to non-Mule code that's out there. When we get on the runtime side, we can automatically scale the environment to be able to support increased volumes. You don't have to manually go and scale that process that's out there. When it comes to troubleshooting, we've embedded troubleshooting tools into the management platform so that you don't have to go to external tools and use those. If you want to send your logs to Splunk or Elk or something else, you can do that, but you don't have to. If you need APIM type stuff, you can go down and actually look at the details of what's going on within one of those processes. And in fact, to help with the troubleshooting aspect of this, we even build for you a call hierarchy of which applications are calling which other applications. And I can come in here and look at maybe the average response time of a particular application and see what's the long pole in my tent to be able to go and triage what might be happening out there. I can look at the failure rate to see which of the components within this particular infrastructure might be encountering failures, and then be able to go and drill into that and find out immediately what is going on within my infrastructure. I don't have to guess and go to a lot of different tools. It's all baked in. But the reason why customers have moved to our platform, in my opinion, the big reason why, is it's simple. As I said, we have one IDE, not one for each part of the life cycle. We have one runtime, not one based on every pattern that I'm trying to implement. And we have one management console, not one for each target environment that I'm going to deploy to. So the simplicity allows me to really leverage my organizational resources, the people in my organization, much more effectively than when I've got all these different tools that I had to use in the past. And so the platform, though, is built around helping you move from an operating model that is purely focused on how do I produce applications to one that is focused on how do I produce reusable applications that are consumption-based and easily consumable. So as I produce my assets, I put those into a marketplace exchange where people can find them. We make it easy to discover those assets, as we have seen through looking at Exchange. And then when I find assets that I want to use, self-service register to be able to access those. And then we are able to provide feedback and metrics around the usage and quality of those assets that we're creating. And by changing the operating model to one focused on reuse, we are able to actually flip the triangle of effort from where we spend a small amount of time on building apps and then a lot of time on ops support and infrastructure, to one that is now looking at a lot more time on apps, a lot less time on operations, and significantly less time on infrastructure. And by flipping that triangle upside down, we're able to deliver more projects to the business with the same amount of resources that we had last year. Now, don't take our word for it. Look at the Forrester Total Economic Impact Study, and you can go out and get the details on this, but some highlights of it is lots of dollars in benefits based on improved productivity, reduced maintenance costs, increased revenue to the business, increased reuse drove a significant amount of revenue in this particular use case, and then savings from reduced maintenance, retired technologies. So those are the highlights of that study. I encourage you to go and look at this in more detail. And when we tie that into the benefits of the platform, we look at the onboarding process. With the code versus configure, we're able to onboard people 65% quicker than when you look at coders that have to be onboarded. When we think about maintenance cost, that single management UI attributes 63% reduction in maintenance cost through that unified management console that's out there. By having the deployment and runtime capabilities that we have, an 86% reduction in runtime cost, an 89% reduction in resource utilization because of the dynamic scaling that we bring to the table, a 94% improvement in integration security because, as we said earlier, security can be automatically applied. You don't have to manually apply it. And when it's automatic, you get tighter security. And then by having the one IDE, the one runtime, and the one management console, all that together contributes to 64% faster delivery of our APIs and integrations. So when you combine all of this together, the full life cycle, the single product, these are the benefits that you can expect to realize from the MuleSoft platform.